I have a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and now a 4-month-old son, 2 girls and 2 boys. I am still pumping breast milk. I am very, very anxious most of the time, as I'm sure most people would be if you were unlawfully separated from your children with no real explanation as to why or what needed to be done to resolve the issue. I've sent no less than 50 resumes per month, some months up to 300 resumes per month, as well as applied to places like McDonald's, Starbucks, other restaurants, and entry-level retail positions that I should not have to apply for. I have 10 years in healthcare of experience. I have home healthcare experience. I'm a fantastic and loving mother. I'm a fantastic and loving caregiver. And I've been basically caregiving in one capacity or another since I was 9 or 10 years old. I was the oldest of all the children in my family, so I was always taking care of and babysitting the kids at family parties when all the kids would go off into, the playroom and the adults would be in the living room or the dining room. I would be the one in charge, and I'd be the one caring for the babies, and I'd be the one, doing mostly everything, and I have my entire life. I have worked in the capacity of caregiver for a fully functioning older gentleman who had some medical issues like diabetes and blood pressure, but for the most part could drive and take care of himself. So it was like a lot of cleaning and hercuing and please take your medicine and please don't be abusive and things like that in a very informal way. He was more like a friend of mine who I just, looked out for and kept his house clean and made sure he took his medicine in exchange for, $300 to $400 a week. That was a fabulous job for me, and I do have letters of recommendation from his family, from the doctors I worked with at Northwestern. I was there for 6 years, working for up to, I would want to say, about 30 to 40 physicians. I don't have an exact count, but we had 20 primary care physicians that I was on call for diabetic education for. I also had 3 endocrinologists who I worked, every day with, Dr. Walter Stoller, Dr. Renee Aronson, Dr. Susan Burke. I also worked with rheumatologists Linda Milletti, Carly Scamra, and Jolly Gopal. I worked on call, so if one of the other assistants would need some coverage every once in a while, I would cover the areas of neurology, gastroenterology, dermatology, front desk. Diabetic education was mine, nutrition, you name it, so pretty much everything. The only thing we didn't have at that practice was pulmonology, and then what we did have in plastic surgery, I never actually covered in the plastic surgery arena. So I do have a wide arrangement of experience. I've also worked, when I was pregnant with 2 children, I worked in factories with my mother-in-law. So I worked through temp agencies and factories. I worked in retail. I've worked literally in every capacity you could imagine. I have letters of recommendation from all of the physicians that I worked with for more than 2 years. I have a letter from my own internist that I've seen for the last 10 plus years, verifying and validating that I have always been following up with him regarding any sort of follow-up that's been needed. And all of that has been submitted in a legal capacity to the powers that be with regards to the situation and resolution for my son and I don't really know what more I can do. It is incredibly anxiety producing to be in this situation and have such little control over the outcome. If we were following the traditional algorithm of do the right things in the face of adversity, I would have, already been in a beautiful home with my 4 children, driving a beautiful car. The world is flawed, as I'm coming to learn, and not everyone who deserves nice things has them. And I do believe in God, and I do believe that at some point, the suffering has got to end. I've watched my mother work really hard her entire life. My mother worked 2 jobs when I was, 0 to 10 years old. So she waitressed on the weekends, on Sundays doing brunch, and she did a full-time office job throughout the entire week, and she still works more than full-time. She leaves at 6 or 7 in the morning and doesn't get home until after 6 or 7 p.m. every night. My dad worked for 20 years in public works, on streets and sanitation. So my family, my stepfather works 2 or 3 jobs at a time. He started out as a broker for the stock exchange or some sort of stock exchange person. And then he moved the trade to his office at home and was still trading from home, from his home office, but was more of a stay-at-home father with my brother while my mother worked full-time. So my family is not a stranger to, being, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. This time of homelessness for me over the last 2 years, I have been faced with situations where you have no choice but to not follow standard procedural law. And, you can't see me doing air quotes, but like any judge, I'm sure, would have, by guidelines of the law, would have to allow for situations where people were forced, not coerced. Coerced is its own thing and it's illegal in certain capacities and contexts. But when it comes, to a situation where a person is literally unable to survive, i.e., survive in the sense of be okay, and not at risk for substantial bodily harm, when their choices are to do a certain action that may or may not be socially acceptable, or die or be hurt, there has to be some sort of bridge in that gap of understanding. And that's, basically the main lesson I learned in all of this is that we as a society have created people who are unable to work. I'm not one of them. I am able to work, but I've met a lot of people who are either not able to because they don't have education or skills, or because they have criminal backgrounds, or because they have addictions, and they're not able to work, physically and mentally unable. And then we put them in positions where there are no resources, and then we scold them for not dying. And that's been the biggest eye-opening, part of all of this, is that if people are outside in the street, especially in an urban area like Chicago or New York or Miami or, any one of these larger towns, in small towns, it doesn't become a problem, because what happens in small towns is, and this is a psychological principle, the closer you are to someone, the better you know them, the more difficult it is for you to be unaffected by their suffering. So in small towns, you see someone sitting outside of the grocery store each day, it's only a matter of time before the town comes together and creates a solution for that person. In larger urban networks, it becomes incredibly more difficult, because until that person is established with a church or a group or a shelter service or something, everyone just walks by and passes the buck and says, well, the next person will help them, or we don't have the resources to help them. Now, from my understanding, large cities are supposed to have shelters. They're supposed to have, phone numbers that can be called and where help is received. But from my experience, and, I'll let Xavier just verify this, just so that you guys can have no doubt in your mind that this is the truth. Hey, babe, can you come here really quick? You have your headphones on? Don't have your headphones on. With regards to us going to Northwestern and asking for assistance, is it true that we called 311, as did Northwestern and several other hospitals, and that no one ever came to give us shelter services?
Yeah, and the cops called for us and said the 311 would come through.
And no one ever came?
No.
So you guys can see, it's not just been a hospital or a police officer, it's been every hospital and every police officer. And we've, gone above and beyond as two intelligent adults. I don't have anything wrong with me. I don't have the luxury of saying, well, I don't know how to pick up the phone and make a call and articulate my situation. So, that's probably what happened. I was incredibly articulate and documented each articulation and shared it publicly, either here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on one of several platforms, and through email with numerous different resources, lawyers, just a lot of different people. Now, if I myself am a fully functioning and capable adult, and I'm being, prevented from, or was being prevented from enlisting in the help of those services, what chance do people who are less articulate, less educated, what chance do they have realistically?